I'll say thanks very much to Julie. I'm squarely standing between you and there's a massive pile of scones outside, so I won't talk for too long. It's really my pleasure to be here and to be a fellow at PPF and to be here at U of T. What I want to do is talk about a paper that we released or is coming out this week from PPF on automation, artificial intelligence, and anxiety. And the basic takeaway from this is that in this world in which populism is on the rise, where nativism is on the rise, there's a potential link between people's concerns about job loss via automation and AI, and there's an arena for government actors to respond in positive ways and to forestall this a little bit. So let me just give you a very high-level overview of this. I'm going to go for 5 or 6 minutes, and then I'm going to run out the door before you have any difficult questions. But the paper is online, and I commend you to read it and send us any comments that you've got. The first thing I'll say is just that our perspective on this is that automation and AI is going to happen not at the level of jobs, but at the level of tasks. And this figure, which many of you would know, comes out of a McKinsey report. The big takeaway from this is that how automatable a job is both high. Most jobs have at least some parts of it that can be automated. Our report derives an estimate that something like north of 90% of jobs have at least one task which can be currently automated at a level at the highest quartile of human capacity or performance. But there's a lot of variation, even within wage classes. Landscapers are much less likely to be automated out than file clerks, for example. But all the way at the other end, CEOs have a certain portion of their jobs which can be automated. This is true as well of people in other high-income professions and middle-income professions. So when automation and AI rolls through, it's not rolling through anymore just in factories, in advanced manufacturing. It's going to roll through whole industries, and it'll have the potential to dislocate more people than expect and different people than are expected. That's the one big trend that's coming with this. The second big trend, which is up until now, as far as we know, unrelated, is that our politics are being disrupted by populism and by nativism. So this cast of characters that's up on the screen includes Viktor Orban, who's the Prime Minister of Hungary. You may know Donald Trump, Marie Le Pen, Geert Wilders. All of them are populists. All of them we consider populists. And I would defy you to define what their policy positions are and see how much overlap there is across their policy positions. There's very little. What they share in common is a style of politics, is a belief that single people, by force of personality, can change a political system, that the political system is stacked against working people and against the common people in the core of a society, that it's tilted in favor of the rich, and that all we need are people who are not politicians to solve political problems. The one thing that characterizes all of these folks is they are remarkably entrepreneurial, more entrepreneurial than their political opponents, much more quick and adept at finding problems and identifying those problems. Solutions aren't really their forte, but finding problems is. So let's talk about how people feel about job loss, and then we'll link these in quickly. We asked people whether they expected that their job would be replaced by a computer or a machine in the next 5 years, 10 years, 25 years. What you can take away if you look at the top left figure is that the numbers are actually quite low, right? Something like 12% of people think that their jobs will definitely or probably be replaced in the next 5 years by a computer or a machine. The number goes up as it should as we push out to 10 years and 25 years. People are overconfident, so if you ask them about other people losing their jobs, they think it's a little bit more likely. But you should look at this figure and ask yourself the question of whether it's right, whether people are correct that many or most of the people they know, that 30% of them will have their jobs replaced in 10 years by a machine or a computer. But what you should know is this, and this is a really important takeaway, is that people's concern about job loss, people's concern about personal job loss and their kind of pro-social job loss is just completely unrelated to their actual own exposure to automation. So we derive very precise estimates and complex estimates for each individual about what their individual level exposure to automation is based on the jobs they do and the tasks they have to do within those jobs. And it's completely unrelated to their own perceptions about their vulnerability to job loss. When automation comes and disruption comes, it will come quickly, and it will come as a surprise to most people who face it. And if you think that that's not anxiety-inducing, then it's going to worry you what comes next. We asked people as well what they thought the social impacts of automation and AI would be. For example, we asked them whether they thought that this would make economic inequality worse in the future or better. And something like 2/3 of people believe that inequality will be made worse by automation and AI. When we asked them whether they think it'll affect social mobility, making it harder or easier for poor people to become rich, 62% think that it'll make it harder for poor people to become rich, and just 10% think that it'll make it easier for poor people to become rich. As people look down the pipeline, you can see what their anxieties are around automation and AI. Part of it has to do with their concern about job loss, but a lot of it has to do with their concern about what's going to happen to social mobility and what's going to happen to inequality in our society. Penultimately, we asked them about populism and nativism, and we asked them, these are analytically distinct concepts. Populism is a belief in an anti-politics, anti-elite sentiment. Nativism is the desire to really shut off your society from people coming in from the outside. They go together to make up right-wing populism, but they don't have to go together. But long story short, we have a bunch of items we use to measure people's latent preferences for populism and for nativism. And the takeaway story, and we can get into the econometrics at another time, but the takeaway story is that people who worry about job loss more are more likely to hold populist opinions. People who worry about job loss more are more likely to hold nativist opinions. People who are worried about the effects of automation and AI in the future are people who are prime candidates to have a political candidate come along and tell them that they have a solution to this problem. There's a whole range of solutions they could propose. Guess who might get there first? The final thing we did was we put a bunch of policy options in front of people in a way where we said, look, government can do nothing or government can do this. And this varied a lot. There are all sorts of things we asked. But the things that elicit the most support are things that we would want. Things like tax incentives for companies to retrain workers, spending more on STEM university education, retraining or older adults. The good news story is people want government to take proactive actions to address the downsides of automation and AI. The bad news story is that for people who are worried, they're more likely to accept any solution. So if someone's worried about AI and worried about job loss, and you come to them and say, a solution to this is government should crack down on low-skill immigration, as though it's a solution, they're more likely to support it because of that worry that they have. What that means then, when you put it all together, is that we have a couple of options in front of us at the level of political economy and the level of political entrepreneurialism. One is to come up with good policies that are going to respond to these things, to be direct about people's fears and to identify how policies are addressing those things, but to not ignore the problem. And the other is to vacate the playing field and say, disruption's good, the social welfare benefits are going to be good overall, it's not a problem. If we say it's not a problem, there's a group of people who are going to come in and say that it is, and their solutions are going to be worse than the ones that we can come up with. I commend you to read the report. Thanks very much for your attention, and enjoy the coffee break.